Welcome to the Hawkins Observer, a podcast where two half lifelong friends recap and analyze every episode of Stranger Things as we prepare for the release of the final season this November.
As always, we'll give you a scene by scene recap discussing the plot and developments, as well as sharing our thoughts, memories, and reactions.
In this episode, we pick up where we left off as Will continues filling out the Vine map. We have too many problems to tackle at once, so we'll just take a stab at explaining them all. Just get ready.
Yeah, so grab more crayons and sharpen your map reading skills because this is season 2, episode 5, Dig Dug. I finally did a little bit of research on this game, Dig Dug.
Never
Uh,
played it.
I hadn't either. Wikipedia states that the player digs underground tunnels to attack enemies in each level by either inflating them to bursting or crushing them under rocks. So that kind of is a fitting title for this episode.
Cool, cool.
Now we know.
All right, well, let's get started. But before we do, please like, comment, and subscribe. That's all I'm going to say. All right, we open. We're at the buyer's house. It's kind of quiet. The porch swing is just kind of creaking. Joyce is trying to call Hopper, but still is just getting his answering machine yet again. I love how his message is like, I'm probably out doing something awesome.
Yeah.
Um, she is still grabbing paper that Will is drawing on, connecting them to the much larger puzzle of vines that's now strewn all over the house. She does find a gap in the puzzle, and she realizes that the paper that she has in her hand goes there.
Hmm.
Will is in his room, sweaty, still looking very pale and unwell, kind of sitting upright on the edge of his bed as he explains to Mike, who's there in his room, what he's going through. He says, it's like I see what he's seeing. I feel what the shadow monster is feeling. Mike says, like in the upside down, and Will says, some of them is there, some of them is here too, in this house and in me. He's kind of trembling. He says, it's like he's reaching into Hawkins more and more. The more he spreads, the more connected to him I feel. And he's like, it used to be like I barely felt him. Now I remember all the time. Mike says, maybe that's good, thinking that maybe Will can spy on the shadow monster since he can see and feel what he's feeling. He's like, maybe all this is happening for a reason. He's trying to kind of make Will feel better and kind of think about it strategically. And Will's terrified, like, well, what if he figures out that we're spying on him? And Mike says, we won't let him.
I think it's interesting that Joyce was not going to let Mike in at first,
Yeah.
even though they're best friends. It wasn't until Mike said, "This is about the shadow monster, isn't it?" that Joyce was like, "Oh yeah, you know exactly what my boy's been through." So, and of course, here's Mike being his encouraging self and somewhat relating the rest of the world to, you know, like not necessarily a game, but like a mission. Like maybe you can spy. Like the only way, just justifying what Will's going through as if to say, "Hey man, something amazing can come out of this."
Yeah, Will's too affected by it all to be thinking in those terms. But
Right.
Mike, being the kind of D&D dungeon master that he is thinking more strategically. All
Hmm.
right, we still don't have opening credits. We cut to Hopper, who's back in the tunnels that he got entered at the end of the last episode. He's walking around corners, down tunnels. He's seeing and hearing things that spook him, noises and things that are like moving. He finally turns his light and sees like a spout kind of thing, and some it like throbs and then sprays something all over him. And he's kind of thrown back into another one of these little spouts that spews him again, and he begins coughing uncontrollably. He starts to get blurred vision, and he falls. He drops his flashlight, his hat, and he appears to be out. As Hopper lays motionless, the hole that he dug to come into this tunnel is seen just closing up the vines like we've seen before and is eventually fully closed. Opening credits.
Yeah, those it was almost like the tunnel had some form of zit. Just something gross and large and just spit on him or like almost again, it's as almost as hard to explain as our fleshy spider web wall, but poor Hopper. Again, it's like Hopper, why do you have to explore this by yourself? Now that you know it's there, don't try to find the end of the tunnel. Like no secrets, buddy system. Like
Yeah. Well, and
if
he
he
went to the upside down in the last season with Joyce. Certainly, he understands the importance of that.
Yeah, so I don't know why on his first discovery of a new portal through the field does he feel like he's got to go it alone.
Well, now he's all alone for real.
I'm John Wayne. I mean, come on, man. Find a friend.
Almost like these spouts are reacting to him being close.
I
It's
think
almost
so
like
too.
they sense that something is close, and then whatever is spewed out of it is like really toxic.
Yep.
Um, you know, we don't know what it is. All right, so after the opening credits, we cut to like a roadside motel, and Jonathan and Nancy pull into this motel and they enter the motel. The clerk could not be less interested or pay any less attention to them. Finally, Nancy rings the bell that's like right in front of her, and they ask for a room, and she still doesn't even look up and goes, "We got those." And she asks for a single or a double. They both very quickly say double. Inside the room, they're laying in their different beds, very awkwardly sitting up, not talking. Finally, Jonathan asks, "Do you want the lights on or off?" Nancy says, "Huh, it's like deja vu." Um, referencing the last time that they were in the same room, bedroom. And Nancy says, "Don't you think it's weird that every time we hang out, it's like the world's about to end, or it's when the world's about to end?" And Jonathan's like, "The world isn't ending." And they kind of share a moment where they lean their hands over the table between the beds and they compare their scars where they cut themselves at the end of last season. Nancy kind of jokes that hers is bigger. Yeah, interlock their hands, their thumbs. And she's like, "Mine's bigger." And finally, Nancy kind of gets introspective and goes, "What happened?" And Jonathan's like, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "Like, what happened to us? Like, after everything that happened, you just disappeared." And Jonathan's kind of taken back by that, but he goes, "Well, Will needed me." And then he goes, "And Steve." And Nancy goes, "I waited." And Jonathan goes, "Yeah, like a month." And then that's it. That's all Nancy needed to hear. She got offended. She rolls over in bed and very quickly says, "I want the lights off." So Jonathan turns the lights off and then he rolls over himself. Like that conversation did not last very long.
Surprise, surprise. I don't know what Nancy's actually getting at here. Number one, that
Yeah.
hotel attendant, I can only imagine how bad the Yelp reviews would be for that type of service at the front desk.
Yeah.
Not kind, but yeah, I don't really know where Nancy's going with this. I believe, that Jonathan, why would he want to be around Nancy when the last thing we saw the last season was Christmas and she and Steve are snuggling on a Christmas couch. So, like,
Yeah.
Jonathan's not going to infiltrate that situation. He's not going to make himself available. So, what's Nancy getting at?
Yeah. I mean, Nancy and him all throughout the last season, they were on mission. They were partners to like accomplish something together.
Yeah.
She didn't really ever give him any indication that she was interested in him.
Mm-mm.
Um, so this whole like what happened to us is like, yeah,
Are we to
it
believe that November of that year, like, they stayed in touch a lot, or November of that year, Nancy hadn't quite gone back to Steve, but then by the time, you know,
Christmas.
yeah, Christmas rolls around.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and I feel for Jonathan because he's like, what did you want me to do? Like, you
Yeah.
wanted me to make a move on you, and you between the time that everything happened and Christmas when I saw you with Steve, you were waiting for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so there, it just got real cold in that room.
Mhm.
All right, next we cut right to Will's room, and it's full of drawings, kind of on his wall behind his bed. Some of them like his really good stuff, and then some more of the Vine map. And Will is kind of shot out of bed with a gasp, And we see Mike laying on the floor, like Mike's staying with him. And he
Hmm.
goes, Will, what's wrong? And in the living room, Joyce is looking over the vine drawings that are all over the living room and hears Will's voice echoing, Mom, Mom. And finally, she's kind of startled by Will really being behind her and goes, Mom. He says, I saw him. And she goes, Saw who, honey? And he says, Hopper. I think he's in trouble. I think he's going to die. And right then, when he says that, Hopper wakes up in the tunnels in real time. We think in real time. He's like coughing and he's grunting and he's really struggling. Then he like spews something out of his mouth, like maybe he just vomits. Clearly not right still, even though he's awake. He is able to grab his hat and flashlight and kind of stumbles on trying to find where he got in at. Um, but he can't find, all he gets is like a dead end. Then he cuts the sleeve off of his uniform with a knife to make as like a dust mask, and he continues searching. A spout behind him spews something again, but this time it's not harming Hopper. He grabs a cigarette from his pocket, breaks it in half, and throws one half on the ground like a Hansel and Gretel situation as he continues down the tunnels. Um, and as he walks away, we see a vine kind of slithering towards him.
So this makes you wonder every time. Does every time Will even just go to sleep, does he start having these now memories? Like we saw when his mom was sleeping behind him, his eyes were
Yep.
going crazy behind his eyelids. So maybe this poor kid, every time he goes to sleep, he's transported there. And again, now we feel for Hopper because he really can't see how he got in the tunnel because it closed over top of him.
Yeah.
So thoughts and prayers.
Yeah. Well, and Will did tell Mike, it's like I remember it all the time now.
Mm,
Like he's like been kind of um possessed by this shadow monster's mind.
yeah.
So maybe he is just seeing this all the time. It's not the last time we see that in this episode even. So then we cut to the Sinclair house and they're sitting at breakfast. Lucas asks his dad, when mom is mad at you, how do you make her not mad? And his mom is like, yeah, I'm interested in your answer to this. He goes, well, first I apologize, then I get her whatever she wants. And Lucas goes, even when she's wrong? And he goes, she's never wrong. Smart man. Um, Finally, Lucas leaves. He says he's going to hang out with Dustin, and Erica just continues to drown her breakfast in syrup. Just great little moment. So he rides away on his bike, but he rides right past Dustin's house. So he said he's going to play with Dustin, but he just doesn't even stop. And as we pass Dustin's house, we see Dustin's mom in the yard, in the front yard, looking for Muse. Inside Dustin's house, Dustin's on the phone, but he's not actually making a call. You can hear the operator's automated voice behind him, and then finally a dial tone as Dustin's like, "Yes, thank you. You've been a huge lifesaver. Yeah, you too." And just fakes this conversation and hangs up. He kind of gets his mom out of the house by saying, "Somebody knows where Muse is. They saw it at Loch Nora, that nice neighborhood from
Hmm.
Trick or Treat Night." And finally, the mom agrees to leave to go look for Muse at Loch Nora with this false hope, obviously. But Dustin's just trying to get her out. He starts panicking as soon as his mom leaves, and he gets like this Home Alone plan. He dons a full like catcher's face mask and all these pads and like hockey leg guards and a hockey stick and everything. And he goes to his bedroom and calls for Dart. He's laid baloney out from the his door, his bedroom door, all the way out of the house.
Hmm.
He opens the door and then just kind of waddles out of the house with all of his gear in a hurry. He's very worried. And he gets outside and he runs into like a shed and he shuts the thing, but he can still see through the slats. Finally, Dart comes outside and he's eating the bologna trail and he turns and sees Dustin's eyes through the slat. And Dustin pulls away and Dustin realizes this is not his plan and he kind of gets up the courage and he throws the door open and he runs out at Dart with his hockey stick and it startles Dart for just long enough that he gets one big great swing with his hockey stick and he just cornered net hits Dart right into the storm cellar and is able to run to the storm cellar and shut the doors, trapping Dart in the storm cellar.
It is fun to see more of the Sinclair's house. At this
Yeah.
point, we don't know if we're going to start seeing more of his parents or Erica, but it was kind of a fun, new world to see for a minute. And then, yeah, Dustin is just, he's a polished liar. Like it's,
Oh yeah.
that's a real smooth move he pulled off there, like very convincing. And obviously, his mom's not the one that he needs to actually come clean. Well, he does, but you know, his mom wouldn't get it at this point anyway. But
Yeah.
he's continuing to dig himself in a hole, somewhat like Hopper.
Yeah. So Dart has been neutralized at least for the second. Um, so then we cut to a truck, like a dump truck or a semi truck driving down a road. But inside the cab, we see 11 and the truck driver. And the truck driver pulls up to an address and says, "All right, this is it. I think 515 Larrabee, right?" And 11 says 515. And the truck driver goes, "Okay, sure, 515 Larrabee." So then he says to 11 when she gets out, hey, you apologize to your mama, yeah?
Mm,
How long has it been?" We kind of get the idea that maybe she's lied to him and said that she ran away from home,
hmm
or maybe he just assumes that. But either way, she walks up the driveway, which is interesting. The driveway is covered with leaves. It's like nobody's come or gone in this driveway for a long time.
mm.
The Ives written on the mailbox as she walks up. She knocks on the door by slapping on it like she's never knocked on a door before. Finally, this Terry's sister we've seen before tries to get her to go away, saying thinking she's a solicitor. She looks at her and says, "Hey, we don't want any of your, cookies or your Thin Mints or whatever." And
Inmates.
finally, 11, the Terry's sister shuts the door on her and walks away, and 11 moves the lock and unlocks the door from the inside with her mind as the sister was watching. She opens the door again with her mind. She's standing there still on the porch and says, "I want to see Mama." And when she says that, the sister realizes pretty much immediately who she is. 11 walks in to see Terry in her rocking chair, repeating phrases over and over again in this catatonic state: rainbow, three to the right, four to the left, breathe, sunflower, rainbow, three to the right, four to the left, 450, she says. Breathe, sunflower, rainbow. As 11 tries to get her attention, Mama, Terry stops her a brief moment for 11 to say, "I'm here now. Jane." But even as Terry's looking at her, she just continued to repeat these phrases. 11 turns to the sister and says, "What's wrong with Mama?"
Yeah, you hope that this becomes like some sort of breakthrough scene, but even Eleven's somewhat supernatural presence is just not enough to uh reach Terry in whatever state she's in.
Yep. And like, what do these phrases mean?
Hmm
She's watching like game shows on the TV. All right, so we cut to an industrial looking complex, a lot of like corrugated sheet metal buildings and junkyard kind of looking place. Jonathan and Nancy pull up to like a hangar kind of building as a train whistle blows close by. They ring a buzzer and a voice from the other side says, "Look at the camera." And they kind of are confused about where to look, and the guy's kind of funny, but they finally find the camera, and then another buzzer sounds as the door opens, and we see Murray in like an old like wife beater and cardigan that's all dirty, and he's just standing there. Um, and he doesn't say anything for a while, but then finally says, "Nancy Wheeler, Jonathan Byers, you two are a long way from home." They walk inside as Murray looks both directions outside, like he's darting around, and he slams the door, and the door is spray painted with "Keep Out." Um, they walk into a room in Murray's, I don't know, home or his complex, and Murray has a classic cork board with twine connecting photos and clippings, and he's very proud of it, like feast your eyes kind of thing, and invites them to take a look and says, "I just have to connect it, but whatever happened to your friend is up there, you know,
hmm
and I have all the pieces. I just need to put them together." Nancy immediately interrupts him and goes, "The timeline is wrong." Like she already knows more than he does. Jonathan says, You might want to sit down for this.
Uh, Murray is a he's not a breath of fresh air, but he is a wonderful new addition to this show because he's just so quirky.
Yeah.
He's the skeptic. He's the uh he's the oh, what's it called? You know, he's the one we need to start really looking into what Hawkins is doing, and possibly he's the one who has no qualms about blowing this story wide open for all the public. He's the conspiracy theorist that we need to
Yeah.
just to keep being curious enough to see this thing through.
Yep. Yeah, he's a great departure of a character
Yes.
from everything else we've seen. He's not from Hawkins. He doesn't
Mm-mm.
live in Hawkins, so he doesn't have that Hawkins kind of feel to him.
No.
He is great. Thankfully, we do get to see more of him. All right, so we cut to Billy now dropping Max off at the arcade in his Camaro. Um, they exchange pleasantries. I mean, they are just at each other. I hate Billy so much. Finally, Max flips him off as he peels out of the parking lot. He drops her off by herself. And inside, Max goes right to the dig dug machine and it's out of order. That dumb faced worker we saw from the last episode at the arcade says that he has another machine in the back, and he takes Max back to like an employees only area to find Lucas waiting for her. Obviously, Max was led there kind of on a plan by Lucas, who told the worker to bring Max back there. You know, the machine wasn't out of order,
Hmm.
and the worker's like, "I hope you finally give me that date." Max is not happy about this little plan, but Lucas is very serious, and he says, I have something to explain to you. He's going to actually tell Max everything that happened last year. But he says, but if anybody finds out, you could get arrested or possibly killed. Max is like, yeah, whatever. She thinks it's all very stupid. And Lucas says, I need you to accept the risk. And Max sarcastically agrees. And Lucas starts the story by saying, last year, Will didn't get lost in the woods. He got lost somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. Forgive me while I go never-ending story mode for a minute because we're just digging right in here. So Lucas is doing exactly
Turn around.
Lucas is doing exactly what his dad said. Give your mother whatever she wants. So in this instance,
Oh,
Lucas must be thinking like
that's a great connection.
what Max wants is to feel like a sense of belonging. She wants to know what's been going on. So
Yep.
that's why Lucas is went straight there to be like, okay, I'm going to give her what she wants, and it's to be on the inside of this knowledge.
Yeah, that's a great connection. And Lucas is so serious, and Max is like, "Oh yeah, sure, yeah, I'll accept the risk of death."
Yep.
All right, so we cut to back to the buyer's house. Will is now still furiously scribbling more vines. I love how he just grabs a crayon like this. But he stops, and we kind of hear thunder outside. And Joyce says, "Is this where you saw Hopper?" And Will says, "I think so." So whatever Will is drawing right there is apparently where he saw Hopper. Um, Mike and Joyce search all of the house for where this particular puzzle piece fits. Um, and they find it. And I think Joyce says, "We just need to find out where here is." Like, okay, it's here on the wall, but where is here in real
Mhm.
life? Before they can discuss this at all, Bob pulls up. And Joyce meets him outside so that he doesn't come in. He's got a bunch of brain teasers in his hand, and he's like, "Hey, when I'm sick, sometimes these help me, especially when I was a kid." And Joyce has obviously just told Will that Bob that Will is sick, and
Hmm.
she doesn't really let Bob help at all. Bob really wants to, but she's like, "It's just not a good time. He doesn't really feel good. He's sleeping." Um, she gets him to leave, but as Bob is walking out, he kind of throws out like, "Hey, I think I can help with these brain teasers. They don't call me Bob the Brain for nothing." And Joyce turns around to go back inside, but then hears him say that, and she turns back around and says, "Bob." And she gets this idea. and she invites Bob in, and he sees all of the like drawings on the wall and stuff, but he's just like, huh, very unbothered. And he kind of starts to ask some questions, but Joyce is like, we already told you the rules, no questions. Just help us find where this is, as she draws an X on Hopper's location on the hallway wall. Bob finally pulls Joyce aside, and he's like, she brushes off all of his concern and even lies that this isn't about Will's episodes. Bob says he doesn't think that this is good for Will. He's like, he's got his hands on his head. He's just like, Joyce, why aren't you like, this isn't good for Will? But as he's saying that to her, behind Joyce, he sees something that he recognizes and he goes, I know that shape. And it's vines kind of in a circular pattern on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, I know that shape. It's like a really particular shape. And he goes, it's Lover's Lake.
Yeah.
And then he starts walking around the house. Well, if that's Lover's Lake, then that's such and such lake, and
Mm-hmm.
that's this river, and that's Sattler's Quarry, and blah 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 blah. And he finally says that the giveaway is that they don't go over water. So he's putting it together. Then he says they act like roads. It's not a puzzle, it's a map. And he's standing in the middle of the living room and says, it's a map of Hawkins.
Wow. Again, every scene he's in, we like him more. He's the
Yep,
opposite of Billy, who we hate every time we see him. But yeah, I mean, Bob will now be remembered as someone who uh is helping Will by just starting to interpret these crazy drawings he's doing. Like, had Bob not come by, who knows what would have happened.
exactly. And give Joyce some credit too for like making the connection that Bob is so good at all these brain teasers
Mm-hmm.
that he might be able to decode
Yep.
all of this. We cut back to the tunnels. Hopper is still exploring. He steps on a slithering vine and he's calling on the radio to get somebody, but suddenly he realizes he's surrounded, like he's in like this room. He's surrounded
Mm,
by bones and like corpses. Uh, he lights his cigarette lighter and he notices that the vines kind of shrink away from the heat.
mm-hmm.
He gets an idea and he goes over to one of the corpses and snaps a bone off and like wraps his jacket, what's left of his jacket, around this bone, and he lights it on fire like a torch. And he looks across this room and he starts like jabbing this flame at the vine wall, and the vines kind of separate into like a hole that's got a wall behind it.
Mm-hmm.
He shoves the bone torch into the ground and he starts kind of peeling back at this wall like he's kind of making a hole out of it. Um, and he kind of breaks through a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is similar to the lab where we see them using fire
Mhm.
or almost lasers to try to fight back this thing. Like, now we know that this thing just, whatever it is, it does not, like most things, I guess, it does not respond well to fire.
Yep, exactly right. Dustin is at his house burying Muse in his backyard. He's got his little microphone radio and he's calling for the boys, saying he's got a code red. He continues saying code red as he's in the house. He's getting like dish gloves on and he's starting to clean up the blood and everything from his room. He's still calling. Finally, Erica answers from Lucas's radio, and Dustin's like, "Is Lucas there?" And Erica's telling him to shut up and like, you know, saying he doesn't care. She doesn't care at all. And finally, she turns the radio off.
Yeah, Muse is obviously his mom's cat. I
Yeah,
don't think Dustin had, at least he hasn't had time to have affection for the cat yet because he's just kind of, as a matter of duty, just burying the cat and getting
yeah.
on with his secret.
The only thing about the cat that he says is when he shoves a dart into the cellar, he's laying on top of the doors. He goes, "Sorry, you killed my cat."
Very matter of fact.
Like you understand, I have to do this.
Yep.
So after that brief scene, we cut back to the Ives, and Terry's sister is trying to get Eleven to explain, where have you been? Where did you come from? Where have you been all this time? and she tells them about a cop and a woman, Hopper and Joyce, coming looking for her last year,
Right.
and is just fixated on Terry. She won't look away,
Mm-hmm.
and she's not listening to the sister at all. And she says, "She won't get better, will she?"
Yep.
Uh, like they said, it's like a dream, a really long dream.
Mm-hmm.
Terry's sister says she always believed you were out there, that you would come home. And 11 repeats home.
Mm.
Sister shows her the nursery room that we've seen before. And
Mm-hmm.
then the sister invites her to stay with them. And 11 nods.
Mm-hmm.
She says, if you're going to stay here, I need you to talk to me. I need you to explain things to me, kind of as an agreement. Like, it doesn't have to be now, but if you want to stay here, you got to talk. Then the lights start flickering in the hallway. They make the same sound of flickering that we've all heard at the buyer's house. 11 notices, and the sister's like, yeah, there's something wrong with the wiring. It's an old house. 11 follows the flickering downstairs, and she's staring at this lamp in the kitchen. And the sister's like, really, it's just the wiring. And 11 says, no, it's mama. And 11 goes into the TV room with Terry, and she notices Terry's nose is bleeding, and she kind of wipes it from her nose.
Mm-hmm.
She says, she knows I'm here. And Terry is still repeating all these phrases. Then
Mm-hmm.
the TV channels start changing without any remote or anything until we see a white noise static channel
Mm-hmm.
come on, and it stays there. And 11 says she wants to talk.
Ooh,
Great.
this was so good. Obviously, we've noticed this pattern of lights flickering before, and the sound that they make helps us to know when, okay, this is a special type of flickering. But so far, I mean, to her credit, like that's a big responsibility for Terry's sister to be like, you can stay here. Like for Terry to
Yeah.
already having been taking care of her sister, but now she's willing to take on 11, like seems like a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. I think she's just so blown away by the fact that we've already seen her talk about Terry as some weird wacko conspiracy theorist, saying, like, yeah, you and Hopper would have gotten along because she's making all these wild claims.
Mm-hmm.
And then now she shows up at the house. I think her mind is just blown.
Sure.
Like all of that was true.
Yep.
All right, back at the buyers, Bob pulls out a real map of Hawkins, like an atlas, all over the kitchen table, and they're measuring things with the measuring tape all over the house to find the proper scale
Mm-hmm.
of this vine map. And Joyce is kind of rushing him about, stuff, and he's like, "What about from here to here and here to here?" And he's like, "You're really twisting my arm here, but if you force me, to try to figure out where that X is, I'd probably say, half mile south of, whatever."
Mm-hmm.
And that's all they need. Joyce, Mike, and Will all just leave. And Bob is like, "Oh, we're really going."
Yeah, Bob says something like, "Well, if you forced me to make a guess and you're forcing me,"
Yeah,
like,
you're really twisting my arm. He says,
yeah, that's
if you
it.
want to twist my arm, and you are twisting my arm."
It's as if he's saying like, if I'm wrong, it's because you didn't give me enough time.
Yeah. But Bob is just like, "Oh, this isn't a brain teaser. This is, oh, we're actually leaving the house to go find wherever this X is."
Yeah.
Okay, so we cut to the Wheeler's house. Dustin's pulling up to the Wheeler's house on his bike, and Dustin knocks on the door or rings the doorbell. Karen's on the phone and tells Ted to get the door, and Ted doesn't. And then finally goes, "I'll get it." And he he answers the door, and Dustin is like, "Is Mike here?" And Ted goes, "Karen, is Mike here?" And Karen goes, "No, he's at Will's." And then
Yeah.
Dustin's like, "What about
What about
Nancy? Is
Nancy?
she here?" And Ted goes, "Karen, is Nancy here?" "No, she's at, Ellie's or whatever." And then Ted kind of realizes and goes, "Our children don't live here anymore." So funny. And Dustin finally leaves, frustrated that nobody can be found.
Mm-hmm.
And as he's trying to leave, Steve's pulling up, and he's got flowers, and he's kind of
Mm-hmm.
rehearsing an apology for Nancy. Dustin just steals the flowers and says Nancy isn't home, asks Steve if he's still got the bat with all the nails in it, and then he just gets in Steve's car. And Steve was like, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I'll explain to you on the way."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very matter of fact. Uh, I mean, and on the one hand, Dustin does Steve a favor by not making Steve embarrass himself in front of the Wheelers. Like, hey, Nancy's not there.
Yeah,
Don't waste your time. But on
yeah,
the other hand, Steve could have no idea what he's about to get pulled into.
yeah. It's the second time now that Steve is an unwilling volunteer for something. All right, we're back in the tunnels now, and Hopper is kind of making progress on this little hole, and he's got most of his head in, maybe up to his shoulders, but he loses his strength and he's spewing again. He collapses and spewing from his mouth. And this time, though, vines are slithering towards him and they kind of surround his legs. He realizes he's getting trapped and
Hmm.
he's cutting his way free. But he's knocked down and immediately surrounded by the vines, pinned. And from outside in the field, in the real world, we hear a distant scream from Hopper as we zoom out where his hole was dug and his police truck is still parked in the middle of the field.
Yeah, a very painful sounding scream. Um, the only thing you can compare it to is when a bug does get trapped in a spider web. But if the spider web was able to actually grow around a bug,
Yeah.
like that's what we've seen this before when they found Will in the Upside Down for the first time, we saw Barb was kind of trapped by this. So now it's happening to Hopper. He's becoming entangled in the web.
Yeah, it's almost like a deer or something getting caught by an anaconda. Just like totally trapped and he's panicked, but he's also in pain.
Hmm.
He is absolutely trapped. All right, so we cut back to the arcade. Lucas is finishing his story with Max, and we hear, and that's the last we ever saw of her. Just
Mm.
and Max kind of feigns, uh, wow, man.
Yeah.
Yes, I liked it. I liked that story. Like he did, I had some issues with it. It was a little derivative. And Lucas is so offended that she's not taking any of this seriously. He's very serious about it. Um,
Hmm.
and she leaves, like, oh, story time is over. And Lucas explains, hey, in this party, we have rules. And one of them is friends don't lie. And she's going back to Dig Dug and she takes the out of order sign off of Dig Dug and says, well, what about this?
Hmm.
I had to do that to protect you.
Yeah.
And so then she starts kind of repeating elements of his story back to him too loudly in the arcade about 11 and another dimension and the Demogorgon and Hawkins lab. And Lucas is like, shut up, lower your voice. Finally, he just covers her mouth with his hand
Mm.
and very intensely goes, you're going to get us killed. And Max is like, you're serious. She goes, prove it. But before they can go any further, Billy shows up and to pick her up. And Max realizes that she's been with Lucas. She grabs his hand and says, don't follow me out.
Mm.
But when she walks out, Lucas is in the doorway and Billy sees him and says, what did we say? And what did we talk about? Not hanging
Mm.
types like that. And he goes, Max says, well, I wasn't hanging out with him. It's just a small town. We just happened to be at the same place.
Right.
And Billy says, you know what happens when you lie. And Lucas, as they peel out of the parking lot, Lucas comes out of the arcade and kind of watches them peel away.
Yeah, you finally think that Max actually believes Lucas after he literally has to physically silence her, but she still says prove it. Like, but she's at least a little more, she at least understands how serious Lucas is being. And then sure enough, just based on what we know Billy so far, the fact that he says, you know what happens when you lie, like we are now scared for Max's safety in two
Yes.
different dimensions or two different scenarios.
Yeah. Yeah. She does kind of get the picture, I think, with Lucas's very impassioned plea to shut her mouth.
Hmm.
Um, all right. So we cut back to Murray's house. And we hear Nancy playing the recording for Murray of Dr. Sam, all of the stuff that he said on the tape.
Hmm.
He finally says, is this enough? Is this incriminating? And Murray just kind of gets up and walks away. And he goes into the kitchen to like pour himself clear liquor drink, and then he puts a record on, and they're like, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm thinking." And Nancy says, "With vodka?" And he goes, "It's a central nervous system depressant. Yes, with vodka." Um, Nancy thinks that she's got this smoking gun, but Murray says it's more complicated than that. Like they need the general public to believe them, not just Murray.
Hmm.
He's like, this isn't believable. He essentially is like, the public just will be too willing to believe any official story, and they won't be curious enough to look any further into it. And so Nancy's like, "So you're saying we did all this for nothing?" And Murray holds his drink up and goes, "No, I said, I'm thinking." So Murray takes a drink of this of straight vodka and kind of gasps and coughs. And he goes into the kitchen to cut it with sparkling water, and the light bulb goes off, and he goes, "It's too strong." And Nancy says, "We water it down." And precisely, they make it more tolerable. And so then they
Hmm.
workshop some ideas about like, oh yeah, maybe this happened and maybe that happened, and the people
Hmm.
would believe that. And they share these ideas about how they can make the truth familiar without threatening,
Hmm.
bring it down for people. And finally, they say, all right, this is how we're going to bring down the people who are responsible for Barb.
Yeah. Murray obviously is fully educated on all of the controversies the lab has had for decades, and he must also know all the ways they got out of it. So that's
Yep.
what he's saying is like, he's like, I believe you, but these other people won't. They won't, capital T or whatever he
Yeah.
says. So it's it's uh it's a funny conniving thing they're about to do, I think, just to start putting easier ideas into people's heads to start them on the path of belief before they actually blow the lid off of it.
It's interesting too. They're not trying to water down the actual truth.
Right.
They're kind of making up something else. Like, oh,
Hmm.
maybe some toxins leaked out of the lab.
Yeah.
Like that's not true at all, but it's
Hmm.
believable enough that the general public would be like, "Oh yeah, we should go look into that."
Yeah. It's like
Um,
they want it to be, they want someone else to discover it as if it was their own idea of, oh, the lab is
yeah,
bad and this Barb girl was killed.
exactly. Back at Hawkins' lab, Dr. Sam is asking a lab tech what they've found. Remember, they're doing
Yeah,
these
well, yeah.
experiments about the element
Pumpkins and
soil.
soil.
And the lab tech explains that they tested the soil and they didn't find any contaminants at all, other than just normal pesticides from farming. And then he says, "We did find something. Take a look at this." And he lowers or he moves a like a Bunsen burner over underneath a beaker full of soil. And as soon as the heat hits it, it starts swirling and spinning and kind of rising in the beaker all
Hmm.
on its own without any other stimulant but the heat. But not only that, even the soil samples all lined up on the other side of the room that are not being exposed to any heat at all are reacting the exact same way.
The
And
only,
they look across the room as they all realize it at the same time.
I mean, they're spinning like a tornado. That
Yeah.
there's just no way around it that like the only way you could describe the new characteristics of this soil under heat is it's taken on a funnel cloud type spinning. Oof.
Yes. All right. Back at the Ives house, the sister is cutting a dishcloth in half. So she has
Hmm.
two even strips of fabric. Kind of 11 is instructing her, like, yeah, that's right. Static in the TV continues as 11 sits on the floor across from Terry. Um, the sister's like, hey, if you talk to her, can you tell her this? And 11 finally says, stop talking. Terry's repeating all of her phrases right as 11 enters the void with the blindfold and the static on the TV. She walks up to Terry in the void as Terry's still repeating all these phrases in her walking chair. 11 is telling Terry that she's there. She's trying to get her attention. She says, I'm home. And when she says that, Terry looks directly at her and says, no,
No.
and grabs 11's hand. And then it's apparently gone. But then 11 opens her eyes as if now she's in another. It's almost like the way I
Hmm.
interpreted it as if now we're in Terry's version of the void, and 11 opens her eyes, and Terry's running behind her, like in a gown, not a hospital gown, like a nightgown. And um, 11 spots her, and Terry's kind of stumbling forward in the void. And she appears to be in labor. And we hear the sister's voice echoing now. We kind of see a vision from Terry's perspective of breathe, just breathe.
Hmm.
The very quick cuts and kind of like tunnel vision of hospital staff performing a C-section, and
Hmm.
brief shot of Dr. Brenner lowering his mask, and we see the baby is out and crying. And then in a recovery room, the sunflowers are sitting next to a bed, and Terry kind of wakes up and asks where Jane is, but the sister is there, kind of waiting for her to wake up to say it wasn't breathing, she didn't make it. And Terry's like, "No, I saw her. She was crying." And Terry is just belligerent about this, and she's claiming that he took her, assuming she's talking about Dr. Brenner. In all this fighting and everything, orderlies come in and she's injected with something. We then see Terry kind of in another shot, like
Hmm.
in this kind of tunnel vision, quick cuts, unlocking a safe. She says three to the right, four to the left, and she grabs a gun out of the safe and loads it. She exits her car at the lab, and then she enters the lab, and a guard asks for her badge, like she's not supposed to be there, and she just pulls the gun on him. And before anything, she shoots him, kind of makes her way up to the floor of kids' rooms and sees a rainbow on the door frame. She enters
Hmm.
that room and sees two girls on the floor playing. One of them we assume is Jane. The other is kind of dark skinned, like maybe she's Collie.
Yep.
She bends down and says Jane, but then she's swept away by guards. They strap her to a gurney as we see Dr. Brenner over her, and they put something in her mouth, like the Princess Bride. Put something in her mouth, put these electrodes to her head. Dr. Brenner says 450, and then they appear to like electrocute her. And the images of all of these things, breathe, sunflower, three to the right, four to the left, 450, rainbow, all flash in repetition, quicker and quicker and quicker, until finally 11 just whips off her blindfold.
This was I think, the hardest for me scene to watch so far. Watching them put those electrodes or whatever to her head and crank it and the sound she makes. Like that was, I think, the hardest thing I've seen in this so far. Um, I remember watching this for the first time, and right away you can't not be suspicious of the sister now. Because why is she in Terry's room saying the baby didn't make it? When clearly, at least,
Hmm.
I mean, at least, Terry's saying, no, I heard it crying. So, and the sister's like, no, it died. It was dead. So was Terry hallucinating? I mean, is this whole thing a hallucination? What actually happened to the baby? Someone's either hallucinating or lying.
Well, I got the impression that the sister wasn't there when they delivered the baby, and the
Oh,
hospital staff just told her, "I'm
okay.
sorry, your sister's baby didn't make it,"
Gotcha.
because they were very quick with all of that.
Hmm.
And
You
the
think they got the sister out of the room during the C-section?
yeah, I didn't get the
Gotcha.
impression the sister was even there during the C-section, and then they just told her that it died. Because again, the sister told Hopper and Joyce that, like, you guys don't understand, the baby was, miscarried or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but that's an interesting take. It's not something I've not thought of. That
Mm.
there could be a world in which the sister is suspect
Yep.
for lying about the baby. I just got the impression that they just lied to the sister and that she's there to kind of give the bad news to Terry.
Yeah, I honestly can't remember what happens, which is kind of fun. Now that we're in season two, like I could have probably told you what happens at the end of every episode of season one before we rewatched them, but now
Right.
I can't remember what's coming. I was surprised in this scene just how pretty of a lady Terry was when she was healthy. Like
Yes.
they obviously did a very good juxtaposition of her like being before the true torture happened to her, very pretty and put together. Even when she's got the gun, she's very put together and looks
Yeah,
very nice. But then when you see her in this rocking chair at home, she's just a shell of a person.
exactly.
And
But
Eleven
it
and
just,
Eleven knows everything now, or at least she's seen all of
yes.
this.
Yeah, and I got the impression again, like I said before, that I think that this was like Terry kind of hijacked Eleven's vision. Eleven was going in to try to talk
Mm-hmm.
to Terry, and I
Mm-hmm.
think Terry grabbed her hand and said no. She was saying, I have something to show you. And so
Mm-hmm.
everything that followed was Terry communicating with Eleven,
Yep.
which is fascinating. And
Mm.
then also answers that question that we've had of like, why is Terry in this state? Was it all the drugs finally got to her? It was like, nope. Dr. Brenner just wanted her gone.
Yep.
So he,
And then
I,
I
I suspect, lied to the sister to give her a story as to why her kid isn't there.
yep.
But again, Jane, and so Jane in the last flashback that we see Terry have in this little void situation is her entering the lab with Jane, but Jane's like, 6
Uh
or something in this scene with what we presume to be Collie.
yep.
So like this was some time after that finally after all of these lawsuits and all of this fighting, she just took matters into her own hands.
Yep. Yep. And at the very end of this scene when Eleven pulls off her blind, I think both she and her mom
Yep.
had blood in their nose.
So that's some sort of effect of their experiments and just their abilities of expanding the minds and blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating scene with the rainbow and the sunflowers. Now we know everything about what that's out about
Yep. One of the most unique scenes to date.
for sure. All right, so Joyce, Bob, Will, and Mike are now driving down this remote road, but they're not finding anything. They think that they're kind of where the X is, but they're like, there's nothing here. Finally, Will shoots up from the back seat and just very matter of factly says, "Turn right. I saw him in my now memories." And Joyce does and enters the field kind of, wild joyride style right up to where Hopper's truck is. And Mike says super spy. And Bob goes, "What's Jim doing here?" And Joyce gets right down into the hole and sees right at the very bottom all these vines and everything. She asks for
Mm.
the shovel from Bob, and she just starts shoving the shovel down into the vines until it kind of opens up a bit. And she just is on a mission. She asks Bob to help her get down there, and Bob is like, "What are you talking about?"
Mm-hmm.
And Joyce enters the tunnel right where Hopper did and begins yelling for him inside the tunnel now. And she's like, "Hopper, Jim." And finally, Bob joins her down in the tunnel and he goes, "Is this Will's map?"
Mm-hmm.
And they both together search for Hopper through the tunnels. And Bob goes, "How did he know all this?" Joyce finds that little broken piece of cigarette that Hopper had left before, and she follows that path. And outside the hole, Will and Mike are just standing in the field, and they see lights in the distance, and it's these white vans pulling into the field. Joyce and Bob eventually do find Hopper's hat and flashlight, and then his arm, and then his face, and they try to free him with some big struggle. They cut him free with a knife, and finally Hopper gets enough strength to kind of break himself free. And um, Hopper stands up, and he and Joyce kind of are embracing for a brief minute. And Hopper goes, "Hey, Bob," and Jim, and Bob goes, "Hey, Jim," and but they're scared from behind. The three of them are the only ones down there, but then they're scared from behind by another man in like a thermal suit, a Hawkins lab guy, and he's like, "Get out, get out!" And they make their way towards the exit, and outside, oh, sorry, in the tunnel, the guy in the thermal suit we've seen before has that same four-piece flamethrower and just starts torching the inside of the tunnel. And
Mm-hmm.
Will reacts as though they are torching him. And he is just writhing on the ground and like yelling in pain and just seizing on the ground. and they are all shining flashlights on him, and they surround him as he's just abs. I mean, it's the second episode in a row now, or second episode of this season that we end the episode with Will just seizing uncontrollably.
The scream that poor little boy makes, it almost doesn't look like him. I almost I almost think they found another actor just to look this much different because he's so contorted as he's tremoring and yelling on the ground. It's the second most difficult thing I think we've watched in this, watching poor little Will on the ground feeling, essentially like his insides are being fried from the
Yeah.
outside. Um yeah, the it is a very it is a funny scene when first they're trying to free Hopper and he's like, knife, and they're like, oh, there's this knife, and then he goes, arms. Like he's having to coach them through his own rescue, like.
Yeah.
And so yeah, he pops up, and then I feel like he, like, he and Joyce hugged, and Joyce is checking on him, are you right, Hopper, are you all right? And then I feel like he just kind of pats Bob on the stomach. We'll have to go back and watch that, but he just kind of reaches behind him and goes, "Hey, Bob."
I love that in that moment they still have these like pleasantries of like, yeah, we haven't been formally introduced or whatever, or hey Bob, hey Jim, and Bob is still like, hey, good to see you, man.
Yeah. And for once, it feels like the lab is coming to somebody's actual rescue.
Yes.
Like when we're
Yeah.
shocked, scared, but all of a sudden we're like, "Oh wow, they're actually,
Yeah.
as a result of the soil that they saw spinning in the lab." I think that's why they took off out of the lab, to be like, okay, we need to go back to the field right now. At least that's what the doctor probably said. Okay, let's go check this out because of what they observed the soil doing under heat. So I imagine they're coming back that night to start making more observations. And then sure enough, it just happens when they get there that there's a
Yeah.
situation actually happening. So phew,
That answers
amazing.
my question because I did think, how did they know right where Hopper was? Because again, Hopper just kind of picked a random spot in this field.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that is probably a good explanation as to why they showed up when they did and where they did.
Mm-hmm.
Just random. But
Yep.
yeah, I mean, it it's the second time now that we've seen this kind of two separate things unrelated to each other reacting simultaneously to this heat. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and now when they're torching the vines, which I guess the other question is, they're supposedly doing regular burns of the portal wall. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but and maybe it's just been, maybe they do them once a week and it
Mm-hmm.
hasn't been time yet. And that's why we've not seen Will react this way yet
Mm.
till they're inside the tunnels.
Oh,
But
interesting. Yeah, there isn't an explanation for that yet. That makes sense. So maybe it is a proximity thing for Will, that if he's close to the vines in the upside down as they're being, like, for example, if Will was in the lab when they were actually doing the flame control, perhaps, if he was in the lab, he'd have the same reaction being that close to the flamethrower hitting the
well, maybe,
vines. Maybe it's a
maybe, yeah,
proximity thing. I don't know.
yeah,
Gosh.
maybe.
Ugh. Well,
Well, just when we thought it couldn't get any worse for poor Will,
yeah, he has an inside fire tantrum.
poor kid.
Yeah.
I mean, surely the first episode, the first scene of the next episode, we're going to see Will recovering or the lab helping him.
Well, if you're going to spy, I think you'd have a better chance of seeing reindeer fly than everything's going to be all right for poor Will anytime soon.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to see what happens. So let's go watch the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
See the rest of you next, right here on the Hawkins Observer.